Exploring Pompeii's dark secrets, what visiting a brothel revealed about ancient lives in the heart of ancient Pompeii, a chilling echo of history whispers from the shadows. Under layers of ash lies a brothel unlike any other, its walls still adorned with vivid frescoes, painting tales of ecstasy and despair. Each stroke tells us of vibrant lives lived in stolen moments, right before the deadly embrace of Mount Vesuvius. The irony bites hard. This place meant for pleasure became a tomb, frozen in time. The mere thought sends shivers down the spine. What dark secrets did these ancient patrons carry? What craving drove them to this intimate sanctuary? As the tourist crowd surge, their laughter contrasts sharply with the brooding silence resonating from these walls. Each visitor steps over scattered remnants of a once thriving society, their sneakers crunching against the relics of a past steeped in scandal. Ornate tiles with strange symbols stand out, drawing inquisitive glances. Were they directions for pleasure or warnings of the lurking desires that thrummed through the air like a restless spirit? The scent of old stone mingles with an unshakable sense of foreboding, creating a dizzying tension that leaves them feeling watched. Whispers ripple through the group. Did you hear about the carvings? One woman gasps, pointing at a particularly explicit etching carved into a stone bench. It suggests more than mere entertainment. It reveals the raw, naked truths of desire, lust, and the very essence of what it means to be human. Faces grow pale, eyes widen. The atmosphere thickens as secrets unravel. What life choices led to despair? Were they choices at all, or was it a pull from forces beyond their control? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. With the sun beginning to set, the light casts eerie shadows in the dim space. The sound of distant footsteps fades, leaving behind a silence so intense that even the air feels electric. A low creaking noise echoes, sending a jolt through the remaining visitors. They huddle closer, sharing tentative glances, as if daring each other to delve deeper. What hidden stories lie buried here, waiting to be unearthed? Not everything is as it seems. Over in the corner, a cracked pot hidden behind a veil of dust catches the eye. A shimmering object peeks from its depths, something that shouldn't be there. The presence of something valuable adds a layer of intrigue, luring the curious closer toward an unknown fate. What could it hold? What would the ancient owners think watching from the shadows as new souls tread upon their sacred ground? With bated breath and heartbeats racing, they wonder, can some truths unleash untold horrors, or will they unveil hope wrapped in an old mystery? Only time will tell if they're ready to confront what remains concealed beneath the ash. As the group gathered around the cracked pot, anticipation hung heavy in the air. Breaths came in shallow bursts, whispers brimming with excitement and dread swirled among the visitors. Each of them wondered, should they lift the lid, or would that act disturb the spirits resting within? Just look at it, a young man exclaimed, his voice bordering on a shout in the hushed space. It's not just a pot, it feels significant. The shimmering object glinted temptingly beneath layers of dust, pulling at their curiosity. Most visitors instinctively took a step back, the thought of disturbing ancient relics churning unease in their guts, but not everyone shared that hesitation. A woman with fiery eyes, a historian intrigued by the culture and lives lost to time, hesitated only a moment before reaching for the pot. Gripping its edge, her fingers trembled as she brushed off the dusty remnants of ages gone by. She slowly lifted the lid, and a rush of stale air sifted through the dim room, accompanied by an unsettling silence. Inside lay a collection of polished stones, intricate and mysterious, their surfaces catching the fading light. Each one possessed a unique color, radiating depths that seemed almost alive, pulsating with stories begging to be told. But as the crowd leaned in, the moment snapped into focus. A sudden chill swept through the chamber, a whisper of something sinister lurking in the depths of the forgotten past. Then came the sound, a low rumble, like thunder rolling beneath the earth. The tourists exchanged wide-eyed glances, fear tinged with the thrill of discovery tightening their throats. The scholar's eyes darted up, then back down, as if the pot itself spoke to her. These stones, they were more than mere objects, she murmured, half to herself. They were part of something darker. Suddenly, the fragile balance shifted. A gust of wind unfurled through the entryway, extinguishing the flickering torches illuminating the space. The room fell into an oppressive darkness, suffocating and thick, as if the shadows themselves folded in on the visitors. Sounds of panic erupted. People scrambled to grab their phones and flashlights, their beams slicing through the black like desperate lifelines. "Get out! We need to leave!" shouted a man, adrenaline pushing him toward the exit, only to meet the panicked expressions of those still frozen in curiosity. Some clutched their phones, casting erratic beams of light over the shifting shadows. The atmosphere became electric, almost as if the very fabric of reality had thinned. In that moment of chaos, shadows twisted and flickered, their undertones pulsing with anger. The air turned sharp as an unseen force roamed the room, the essence of desires long buried clawing its way back to the surface. Each pulse stirred haunting echoes, whispers of the past pleading to be heard, and the ground beneath their feet felt unstable, as if the earth itself was warning them to heed its message. Grappling with terror, the historian grasped one of the stones. What if it held answers? But even as she did, a voice boomed inside her mind. "There's always a price for the truth." Suddenly, silence. The torches reignited, casting eerie light across the room once more. Yet now the atmosphere had shifted, the stones vibrated with energy, and eyes wide open, the group stared bewildered. No one moved, breaths coming quicker now, the weight of dread settling in again. What had they awakened by disturbing remnants of desire? What dreadful truth lay buried beneath the ashes of Pompeii? The historian steadied herself, knowing the answers might come at a cost she wasn't prepared to pay. Would they confront the agony of humanity's forgotten sins, or flee in terror to protect their fragile minds? The only certainty now was that the night was only beginning to unravel its mysteries as they started to uncover the implications of their curiosity. A soft glow pulsed from the stones, almost beckoning. What other secrets awaited them beneath the shadows? Were they brave enough to find out? The glow from the stones intensified, sending glimmers against the worn walls, painting the room in shifting hues of azure and crimson. With each pulse, the atmosphere thickened, almost electric, wrapping around the group like a tightening noose. Murmurs broke through the silence, a mix of courage and fear, curiosity battling against an instinct to flee. What are they?" a woman whispered, her voice trembling as she stepped closer to the historian. The historian's heart raced. She could feel the weight of the stone in her palm. It was warm, vibrant with an energy that felt oddly familiar yet deeply unsettling. "I don't know," she breathed out, her thoughts racing. But they must have meant something to the people of Pompeii. Something important. As if responding to her words, the stones shifted slightly, and a low hum began, wrapping around them like a mournful chant. It thrummed through the air, vibrating against their chests, stirring emotions long buried beneath layers of dust and time. The historian felt it deep within her, a pull that was both inviting and repelling. "No, we should go," shouted the young man, panic lacing his voice. "This is madness." But before anyone could react, shadows began to swirl at the edges of their vision, shapes morphing and dancing like figures from some forgotten nightmare. The historian clutched the stone tightly, unwilling to let go even as the oppressive energy intensified. Could it be they were reliving moments of the past? Were these shadows merely echoes of lives lost? Then the air thickened further, forcing them to gasp for breath. A piercing scream shattered the dark silence, echoing from the very walls around them. Everyone froze, eyes wide, hearts pounding against their ribs like war drums. The scream faded, but the weight of dread lingered, seeping into their very being. "Please," a voice whispered, thin and fragile, drifting through the air. "Help us to be remembered." Was it a plea from the past? The historian's mind raced with unrestrained thoughts, fragments of ancient tales she had studied, the debauchery of the brothels, the lives of those crushed beneath the waves of time. Were these souls trapped, yearning for resolution? Maybe we should listen, she said, her resolve tightening. They're trying to tell us something. They want to be seen. But at what cost? Another voice shot back, tinged with fear. What if they're angry? What if this is a trap? The stones pulsed again, the soft light brightening, and the shadows momentarily coalesced into the faceless forms of those long forgotten. Emotions flickered across their ethereal faces: hope, despair, longing, desperation filled the historian as she wrestled with the decision. If they turned away now, they could leave in relative peace, their minds intact. But to forge ahead? To beckon the stories buried within the stones? A shiver coursed through her, and she felt the weight of history pressing upon her shoulders, urging her onward. Then we face it together, she finally breathed, rallying the group. We owe them that much. The others hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances. Then, one by one, they stepped closer to the glowing stones. The hum grew louder, the shadows swirling like a tempest around them. Suddenly, the historian felt a sharp jolt, cold and searing, as visions shot through her mind, scenes of pleasure and pain, fear and hope, life and death. Her knees weakened, the weight of history crashing down like a tidal wave. Before she could catch her breath, the world around her dissolved into fragments of vibrancy and despair. They were no longer in the chamber but thrust into the heart of Pompeii, witnessing the lives of those who had once walked the streets with dreams and desires. Eyes wide, heart racing, she understood, this was only the beginning. What other harrowing truths would they unearth in the ruins of time? As the visions continued to whirl around her, a flickering thought emerged, a chilling reminder that some truths were never meant to be discovered, and not all those who cry for remembrance wish to be saved. Would they be prepared for the depths of their revelations? The shadows whispered another secret, one that would change everything. The historian gasped as the visions morphed into clarity. They stood in a bustling street of Pompeii, the sound of merchants calling out, children laughing, and the scent of fresh bread wafting through the air. The colors were more vibrant than any painting she had ever seen. Yet, there was an underlying tension. People moved with purpose, but her focus was drawn to the shadows lurking at the edges, figures hidden in doorways and alleyways, eyes darting. A group of men stood outside a brothel, laughter mingling with growls, casting wary glances as if they sensed her presence. The historian's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the weight of their gazes, hungry with desire and desperation. Look! She cried out, pointing toward the facade of the building. We're inside their lives. The others stirred beside her, their faces pale. They could only experience this as witnesses, but the historian felt the pull and urge to step forward, to understand what they had endured. Listen! Whispered the voice again, clearer this time, echoing in her mind. Help us find peace. A rush of warmth enveloped her, an urge to comfort those who seemed lost in an endless cycle of desires and regrets. The shadows spiraled around her, forming shapes that writhed with a mix of pain and ecstasy. She stepped forward instinctively, and as she did, the small crowd in front of the brothel parted. The historian felt a sudden chill, their emotions flowed around her like a heavy mist, cold and unforgiving. One figure emerged from the throng, a woman with sorrow etched upon her features. Her dark hair fell in waves around her face, and her eyes shone with both anger and longing. You think you can save us? The woman cried, her voice sharp yet filled with a haunting melody. You tread on ground soaked with our tears. The historian's heart raced. We just want to understand. To help you be remembered. How can we be remembered when you choose to ignore the truth? The woman challenged. Look closely. See what we faced, how we begged for release. The historian's vision blurred, and the vibrant picturesque world was stripped away, replaced by grim realities. Screams of women shifted throughout the house, moments of excruciating pain hidden behind veil of pleasure. The laughter transformed into cries of despair, mingling with the flickering shadows of despairing souls. The group, rooted to the ground, felt the intensity of those moments seep into their bones. The chilling realization washed over them, this was their past, and it was darker than any of them had prepared for. What now? A young woman whispered, her voice trembling. We can't just leave them like this. A sudden rush of wind burst through the spectral scene, scattering the shadows like autumn leaves, and the cries faded into a haunting silence. The historian turned to the group, confusion etched across their faces. Did you see that? She asked, her voice shaky. They need us. But even as she spoke, a flicker of doubt crept in. What if this was more than they could handle? What if the truth echoed back at them with revenge? Her resolve began to waver, clashing against the urgency to still dive deeper. She felt the stones pulsate again, calling to her, demanding she continue this descent into darkness. We can't ignore them. We must uncover their stories. Yet just as she steeled herself, the room around them wavered, colors darkening as a shadowy form emerged larger than the others, with an inky essence that devoured the light. The very air turned frigid. What have you awakened? It asked in a thunderous whisper, its voice laced with an abrading coldness. The historian's heart raced, panic rising as the shadow thrust itself closer. Run! A panicked voice shouted from the group, but all they could do was stand frozen as the ground beneath them trembled. The historian's breath hitched. Would they erase the history of the ones trapped here? Or face the wrath of something awakened in its fury? And the shadows loomed over them, a dark veil threatening to swallow them whole. What had they unleashed, and could they escape? Before becoming part of the very darkness they sought to unveil. The chilling realization settled in, they might know more than they ever wished to. The historian's heart pounded in her chest, hammering against her ribcage as the claustrophobic shadows pressed in. The menacing whisper echoed, wrapping around her like tendrils of smoke. What have you awakened? It was a question that sent a jolt of fear through the group. Please, we need to go. Someone whimpered, their voice barely breaking through the dread that thickened the air. Panic took hold in their eyes, each face reflecting the desperation of their plight. The historian felt a tug at her core, they could not simply flee from this moment, this was bigger than any of them. But could she remain here, facing an entity that seemed born of their darkest fears? Sudden movement broke her reverie. From the shadows, the woman who had spoken earlier stepped forward, her expression a mix of rage and heartbreak. You can't run from the truth. Not now, when you've finally caught a glimpse of it. Her voice rang out with an urgency that stung like a slap. The historian felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by this unimaginable interplay of time and despair. The crowd around them, still transfixed by the looming presence, now seemed suspended in a moment of reckoning. Show us, she said, her voice trembling yet resolute. If you want to be remembered, show us the truth behind your pain. In doing so, she felt a strange shift. The frigid air trembled with anticipation as the shadow hesitated, as if debating whether to unleash its fury or reveal its secrets. It briefly retreated, and with it, silence slid over the crowd like a heavy shroud. Foolish girl, the voice thundered, but now it held a different timbre, as though curiosity wrestled with anger. You wish to know our suffering? Look closer, then, but only if your hearts can bear it. A haunting illumination flickered into existence, illuminating the abandoned corners of the brothel. The scenes began to unfold, each moment capturing fragments of lives intertwined with sorrow, desire, and survival. A young girl, barely more than a child, appeared on the threshold. Her innocence collided harshly with the environment, the grotesque distortions of adult pleasure surrounding her like wolves ready to pounce. The historian gasped, her heart shuddering. How could this happen? She whispered, grappling with the ugly truth of humanity laid bare. What you deem as freedom is a gilded cage, the woman replied bitterly, her eyes like shards of glass reflecting a painful legacy. We existed in a world where laughter masked our cries, and love was tangled in deception. As the shadows melded with memories, the air thickened with stories untold, flashes of laughter drowned out by sobs, cries for help swallowed in the darkness. There were moments of sheer agony juxtaposed with fleeting joys, lives lived on the edge, struggling to carve meaning out of despair, yet, somewhere amid the chaos, she felt a flicker of defiance. These souls, so battered, still yearned to be seen, to be remembered. The historian's heart surged with determination. They needed to bear witness to their story. But the shadow looming over them began to swell, its rage igniting at the exposure. Enough! It roared, an explosion of darkness washing over them, suffocating. These tales do not belong to you. The historian felt her breath catch, the weight of despair deepening. Would they become entangled in the very fabric of this sorrowful story? Then, before the darkness could completely envelop them, she heard the whispers rise, weaving through the air the echoes of those who suffered, voices now harmonizing with her resolve. Help us, remember us, set our stories free. As the world darkened and light fought to break through, the historian stood firm, a beacon amid encroaching night. But would her courage be enough to resist the shadow's wrath? Tension gripped her being as she understood the choice before them. They could flee this truth and allow it to rot in silence or embrace it, risking everything to turn the tide. And just as hope flickered in her heart, the entity lunged forward, a terrifying rush of darkness, and her world began to dissolve around her. What came next could either be liberation or annihilation. Are you ready? The woman asked, her voice laced with both dread and determination. Or will you let our story be lost forever? The darkness pulsed like a living thing, shrouding them in its suffocating embrace. Fear gripped the historian as the shadow surged, a whirl of violence and fury aiming to consume their last threads of hope. Her heart raced, each beat an echo of dread. Was this the end? Would they fade into the same oblivion that claimed so many before? No. She shouted, the word erupting from her throat like a bullet. We will not vanish into silence. Around her, the crowd stirred, their faces illuminated by that eerie glow. She could see panic morph into growing resolve. We must remember them. Someone cried out, emboldened by her words, their voice rising above the whispering gloom. The passion swept through the group, each member grasping the weight of the moment. The entity halted, its darkness quivering with uncertainty, as if unsure how to react. For a split second, the oppressive weight lifted. Hope flickered like a candle flame in the night, but the shadow quickly retaliated, whipping through the room like a storm. You are trespassers. You think you can intrude and understand? But the historian felt a bolt of energy pulse through her, igniting a fire deep within. We don't need to understand it all. We only need to bear witness. You suffered. We see that pain, and we honor it. Her voice was steady, cutting through the chaos. The memories ensconced in the murky ether seemed to convulse and swirl around her, filling her with a bittersweet strength. The whispers of the lost gained volume, melding into a symphony of desperation and anguish. Remember us. Remember us. They implored, a cacophony that washed over the shadow like a cleansing tide. The dark form reeled back, shuddering as if it were more afraid than angry. It flickered between human sorrow and primal rage, battling with an unseen force only they could feel. Ignition sparked a determination in the historian's soul. She recalled the innocence of the young girl in the shadows, the masked laughter within the walls they sought to escape. It was then she realized this wasn't about evading the truth, it was about passing it on. Suddenly, the shadow convulsed violently, throwing the gathered crowd apart like rag dolls in a gust of wind. A scream broke through the heavy air, raw and terrified. The historian turned just in time to see one of her friends, a young man she had come with, thrown against the far wall. His body crumpled in a heap. No! She cried out, rushing toward him. The urgency of the moment triumphed over her fear. They needed to stand together, united against this malevolence. As she knelt beside him, she noticed the flicker of life still remaining in his eyes. Stay with us. She pleaded, cradling him in her arms. Fight. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest as a burning sensation spread through her palms. Sweat dripped down her brow, but she fought against the rising tide of despair. From the corner of her eye, she saw the others rally, pushing against the shroud of darkness. They surged forward, drawn together by the shared resolve to face their fears. With each heartbeat, the bonds of their collective determination tightened like an unbreakable chain. When she looked back at the shadow, it shrank further, as if the power of their unity created a barrier against its wrath. "You will not silence us," the historian declared, her voice booming now. "We will remember your stories. We will tell the world. You have lost your grasp on our narratives." The very air trembled, and in that moment, she sensed a shift. The oppressive weight of the darkness felt lighter, almost threadbare. But deep down, she could still feel the tension crackling, like the moment before a thunderstorm, fraught with potential. Then, a deafening silence followed, sharp and triumphant as the shadow shrank back, howling in retreat. But another cry pierced the air, not a scream, but a mournful wail echoing through time, leaving them in suspense about what awaited. They had faced the darkness, but would it truly be enough? The cracks in the shadows widened, revealing hints of light. Yet the storm still brewed on the horizon, hinting at greater challenges to come. "What do we do now?" someone whispered, eyes wide with uncertainty. The historian held her breath, feeling the weight of their choice settle upon her shoulders. "We stand strong. We carry their stories into the light, but we need to find the way first." And as she spoke, a flicker of dread ignited anew. What other horrors awaited them in the shadows? The thread of uncertainty wove through the air like smoke, threatening to snuff out the fragile spark of hope. They were on the edge of discovery, but the precipice looked too steep. As the shadows roiled and twitched, the historian sensed one more chance to unlock the mystique of this ancient darkness. "Follow me," she urged, the call echoing in the cavernous space. "Our stories are waiting to be told before it's too late." The crowd hesitated for a moment, caught between the fear of the unseen and the flickering hope ignited by the historian's words. Shadows still twisted around them, more insidious now, as if aware of their intention to break free. But the historian took a breath, each inhale grounding her a reminder of the life pulsating around her. "We can't stay here," she urged, her voice a beacon. "We need to push forward. Who knows what awaits if we do nothing?" She stood, determination flooding through her veins, heart racing with purpose. One by one, faces turned toward her. They were afraid, but they were brave, and their resolve grew like a wildfire amidst the encroaching darkness. With that potent energy wrapping around them, she stepped into the void, leading the way. The lingering wails from the shadows felt like chains attempting to pull them back into fear, but they held tight to each other, their shared strength forming a barrier. "Move!" she cried, and the group surged forward, hearts pounding in unison. They navigated through flickering light and dark, dodging fleeting forms that whispered their fears. This was the moment. Facing the void was their choice, an act of courage beyond comprehension. As they pressed onward, the ground beneath their feet turned uneven, shifting from solid earth to crumbling stone, as if they were moving through the ruins of a long-lost past. Dust hung in the air, thick and choking, obscuring what lay ahead. "Can you smell that?" one woman said, breaking the oppressive silence. A few noses wrinkled, catching scents of something ancient and musty, mingled with the fiery essence of the darkness that encroached. "It's like everything here carries a story." "Exactly," the historian shot back, flesh creeping as memories prickled against her consciousness. "Every story may hold a clue. We just need to find the right ones." Suddenly, a flicker of movement to her left caught her eye. A figure, barely illuminated, stood silhouetted against the collapsing shadows. Heart racing, she motioned for the group to halt. The figure stepped closer, revealing a young woman, her eyes glinting with a mix of fear and desperation. "Help me!" the woman gasped. "They are coming for you. If you continue you will." But before she could finish her warning, a violent gust of wind cut through the space, whipping at the historian's hair and scattering loose stones at their feet. The shadows roared in fury, swirling ominously. "Do not listen." The shadowy figures intoned, voices layered like tortured echoes, reverberating through the narrow hall. Turn back. You will not survive the truth. The historian's mind raced. What truth? Would the stories they uncovered tear them apart, or bring them solace? She felt a fierce tug in her chest, the weight of generations pressing down, urging them to dive deeper. Stay together. She shouted, eyes darting between the increasingly agitated figures. Listen to your heart, not the shadows. As the group increased their pace, she lunged forward, grasping the woman's hand. Come with us, we'll find a way out. You don't have to do this alone. But just as the woman began to step forward, a powerful force yanked her back, the shadows latching onto her like a predator with prey. Horror cascaded through the crowd as they watched in disbelief. Run! The historian screamed. If we are to carry these stories, we mustn't lose one of our own. With every ounce of strength left inside her, she turned her back to the dark energy swirling around them, urging the crowd forward. Each step took them deeper into the darkness, deeper into their collective fear. But little did they know that the heart of this darkness held revelations more terrifying than they could ever imagine. As they moved, a chilling question hung in the air: what had they awakened in their fight for truth? The ground beneath them trembled ominously, promising a revelation their hearts might not be ready to bear. Would it ignite the spark of hope, or would it consume them all? The air thickened with an oppressive weight as the group pressed further into the darkness. Each heartbeat felt like a drum signaling their descent into an abyss of fear and uncertainty. Shadows flickered against the crumbling walls like distorted memories begging to be remembered but best forgotten. Keep moving. The historian urged, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. Fear was palpable, tinging their every breath, but hope flickered stubbornly in their hearts. They could not afford to look back. Not now that as they maneuvered through a narrow passage, unseen hands seemed to graze their shoulders, sending shudders racing down their spines. Whispers enveloped them, overlapping echoes of warning and despair. The historian strained her ears to differentiate between the warnings of the trapped souls and her own determination. We're not lost, she asserted, gripping the hands of those flanking her tightly. We're searching. Every lurch of the ground reminded them they were intruders in a place long conquered by silence. A heavy silence like the stranglehold of death itself. It squeezed the air out of their lungs, turning their whispers into hushed prayers. Was this the dust of lives past? Echoes of laughter, sorrow, and pain. Suddenly, with a flutter like the beating of frantic wings, the passage opened into a broad room lit by an eerie luminescence. Skeletal remains of ancient furniture were strewn around, and the stone statues that decorated the room seemed to leach warmth from the very air they breathed. The historian took a step forward, heart pounding, her gaze locked onto a faded mural on the far wall. What is this place? A voice behind her trembled. She just shook her head, mesmerized yet terrified. The mural depicted scenes of life, passion, and loss in a world that felt so foreign yet achingly familiar. Figures entwined in moments of intimacy danced through the artistry, faces rendered in agony and ecstasy. And then something shifted. Beneath the floor, a rhythmic thumping reverberated. The historian's stomach dropped. It was as if the heart of the structure was beating once more, and a weight of dread surged. Did you feel that? One man whispered, eyes darting. Like a pulse, another woman responded, her voice barely above a whisper. Frantically, the historian scanned the room, each second stretching into an eternity. The shadows that had once whispered their fears now writhed as if alive, closing in around them. What had they awakened? Listen! Someone shouted as a deeper voice echoed around them. You have ventured too far. Leave this place while you can. The historian stepped closer to the mural, drawn by an inexplicable pull. There's something here. Something important, but just then, the ground shook violently. The once gentle pulse transformed into a threatening tremor. Dust rained from the ceiling like a shroud, and terror flooded the eyes of her group. Panic surged as the shaking intensified. Run! She cried out as she turned away from the mural, feeling a relentless tug on her consciousness. We need to get out of here. They turned to flee, but the shadows were waiting. Clawing hands reached from the walls, dragging at their clothes, grasping for their very souls. The historian struggled against the pull. Not again. She screamed, heart racing as she felt the familiar chill of shadows encroaching. Memories flashed of warnings, betrayals, secrets buried beneath layers of time. Her mind screamed at her to remember. Stay together. We're stronger. She shouted, feeling unity with her group through their shared fear. Yet a piercing scream cut through the chaos, dragging the historian back. It was another woman from her group. The shadows had claimed her. Just a blink of an eye and she was gone, snatched from their grasp like a whisper in the dark. As the remaining members stumbled toward the exit, uncertainty loomed behind them, heavy and menacing. What truth had they unearthed? They could sense it, lingering, an unsettling promise of revelations waiting in the depths of the darkness. Could it flip their purpose upside down? They burst out of the room into the corridor, adrenaline surging, but dread coiled in the pit of their stomachs. Each step was a race against the unknowns that threatened to consume them. But now, one question hung ominously in the air: what price would they pay for the truth that had been buried for centuries? The corridor twisted and narrowed, an insatiable maw eager to swallow them whole. The air crackled around them, buzzing with dread. Every whisper, every flicker of movement made their hearts pound harder. They had barely caught their breath when another rumble echoed, this time louder and accompanied by the distant sound of collapsing stone. They're coming! They're coming! One of the men yelled, panic stripping away his composure. Shut up! The historian snapped, adrenaline driving her urgency. We need to focus. But how could they? The shadows that had once lingered now surged after them, relentless tendrils reaching for any careless outstretch. She felt the slap of cold against her neck as one swung close. A brief glance over her shoulder sent ice through her veins. Twisting forms roiled in the dark, their faces twisted with rage, their eyes burning with a malicious intent that set her heart racing. Faster! She commanded, urging the group onward. The walls seemed to close in, and the distant noise of ancient stone crumbling felt like a countdown. They had a small lead, but the shadows pressed closer, keeping pace like a pack of hungry wolves. Where are we going? Someone shouted, desperation clawing at their voice. Just keep moving. Instinct guided her, pushing toward a flicker of light that danced ahead, an inexplicable glow that beckoned and terrified her. Each stride brought them closer, but she could feel the weight of darkness tightening around their ankles. Then, as if sensing their resolve, the corridor veered sharply to the left, leading to an adjoining chamber. The historian risked a glance back, teeth clenched as she saw the shadows pooling at the entrance, a billowing sea of despair. A single figure stepped forward, shadows swirling around them. It was the woman they lost, her expression frozen in panic and sorrow. Was that pity she saw in her eyes? A twinge of disbelief mixed with sorrow choked her. No! She screamed, but it fell on deaf ears, swallowed by the decay that surrounded them. They burst into the new room, collapsing in a tangled heap. The historian raised her head, breathless, and surveyed the space. Littered across the floor were fragments of pottery and what looked like relics of a bygone era, the remnants of lives lived and lost. In the center, a small shrine flickered with a feeble flame, casting ethereal shadows that danced across the stone walls. It was almost serene here, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. What is this place? Someone whispered, eyes wide as they absorbed the heavy history wrapping around them like a thick fog. She pushed to her feet, heart still pounding. This must be some form of sanctuary, but for who? As she stepped closer to the shrine, visions flooded her mind, the laughter of lovers, cries of anguish, whispers of secrets. They were alive, vibrant memories shaking off the dust of time. Each fragment felt like a lost piece of the puzzle, begging to be put together. Then her gaze fell upon the wall behind the shrine. Hieroglyphics, ancient scripts that twisted and turned, spoke of warnings and truths. A creeping dread gripped her. These weren't just tales, they were cries for help. She squinted at the symbols, trying to decipher the timeless warnings. "Look!" one of the others cried, pointing to a rough drawing next to the script. The mural depicted a similar group, their expressions almost identical to hers and her friends, fleeing from shadowy figures like a chilling mirror into their predicament. They weren't alone in this experience, they were repeating history, but why? "Is it too late?" a voice murmured, trembling with fear. The historian felt cold sweat trickle down her back. They could risk staying in this sanctuary but couldn't ignore the chilling truth looming large. What if they were fiercely intertwined with the very shadows they feared, just like those who had been lost before them? Then, a loud crash echoed from the corridor, sending pieces of stone raining down. Darkness whispered sweet, deceptive promises from all sides. Time was running out. Why did we have to come here? Someone wailed, panic rising. Because we're destined to uncover the truth, she said, her voice firm despite her quaking heart. But can we survive it? With a final glance back at the shadows creeping ever closer, the historian turned to her group, determination igniting in her veins. There was no choice left. They had to find a way to confront whatever history demanded of them before they too became mere whispers in the dark. Yet, one final thought hung in the air, heavy and foreboding: was the truth worth the price of their lives? The shadows writhed, a dark sea swelling with a primal fury that threatened to consume everything in its wake. The historian steadied her breathing, heart pounding like a war drum against the relentless terror encroaching on the sanctuary. "Listen!" she called out, desperation threading through her voice. "We've come too far to give up now. We need to face this together." With that declaration, the air shimmered, charged with the potent energy of their collective resolve. Each face reflected the indomitable spirit rising from the depths of despair. Fear was fierce, but their courage flickered like stubborn embers in the night. As they gathered closer, the darkness hesitated, a ripple of uncertainty rippling through its mass. The historian took a deep breath. "We need to honor these stories. They are the key." She turned back to the shrine, eyes falling on the intricate carvings. "They tell of a history too deep to ignore, a pain that demands recognition. We can't turn away." The shadows danced, flickering like flames, momentarily stunned by their united front. "You think bravery will save you?" a voice boomed from within the darkness, thick and twisted. "You are still just flesh, you cannot stand against us. We can remember," she shouted defiantly. "We can tell their stories. That's our power." The air buzzed with an energy that coursed through her veins, a realization lighting her heart. They weren't just witnesses, they were the narrators of their plight, the torchbearers of their truths. The crowd felt it, a shift, a swell of bravery ignited by the marrow of their shared humanity. The historian scanned their faces, her heart swelling with fierce pride. "We will tell your stories," she proclaimed, firm and steady, and the echoes reverberated in the chamber. "We will honor you, your desires, your pain. We will bring your memories back." At that moment, the shadows recoiled. For the first time, they seemed unsure, flickering as though caught between two worlds, the history of suffering and the nagging hope for freedom. The historian pressed on. "You were real. Your lives mattered. You deserve to be remembered, not forgotten. You're a part of us, we carry you in our hearts." The surge of determination rose like a tidal wave, crashing against the oppressive weight of darkness. The entities within erupted in anguished howls, but they were now racked with confusion. Their grip was loosening, the shadows uncoiling from around the group like smoke in a gust of wind, and then, the woman, the very spirit who had spoken to them before, emerged from the darkness, eyes shimmering with both sorrow and gratitude. "You honor us," she breathed, voice crackling like fire under frost. "To be seen, to be remembered, it is a gift, but the truth can come at a price." The historian felt a twinge of dread, but she stood firm, nodding. "We're ready to bear witness. Show us what we need to see. Help us understand." Gently, the shadows coalesced into a swirling mist around them, beckoning forward. As the last of the murky tendrils lifted, the room brightened with an ethereal silver light. Visions twisted through the air like striking colors on a canvas, swirling together in breathtaking movements of lives lived and lost. They saw the tormented faces of those silenced by time, joy mixed with agony, love overshadowed by heartbreak. The historian watched, tears streaming down her cheeks, as the stories replayed in vivid splendor, a tapestry of humanity laid bare. "Feel with us," one of the echoes implored, voices mingling together as a haunting chorus, and the historian's heart swelled with the ache of memories, intertwining their fates with those lost beneath the ash. "We will remember. You will not fade away," she shouted, every ounce of her being resonating with commitment. As the final echoes of history sang through her soul, the room pulsed with warmth and light. Each face, once twisted with torment, became radiant with relief. The shadows began to slip away, retreating into the cracks of time, and the sanctuary felt alive with a permanence that hadn't existed before. The weight in the air gradually shifted until silence cloaked them, not an ominous silence, but one filled with compassion and understanding. They had bridged the gap, a connection binding past and present together. The shadows that threatened them now lay in rest. The historian turned to her group, and for the first time, as they held hands in shared victory, she felt the truth of her heart resonate in the silence. "Together," she whispered, "every word a vow, we will carry their stories to the world." With that, the sanctuary filled with light, enveloping them, and they felt the ancient walls welcoming them home. As the warmth washed over them, the darkness which had once threatened to devour their souls now transformed into a bittersweet memory. They emerged into the daylight once more, standing upon the ash-strewn ground of Pompeii, breathing in the fresh air that smelled of possibility and promise. The weight that had pressed upon them was gone, replaced with a fierce determination to uphold the stories that had begged for remembrance. "From this day forward," she proclaimed, her voice ringing true, "we will ensure that the stories of Pompeii live on. We carry the echoes of life, love, and pain forever a part of who we are." As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the ruins, the historian looked at her companions, a familiar warmth wrapping around them like a comforting embrace. They were free from the shadows, liberated by the truths revealed, ready to share the legacies of those who had come before, a promise made under a sky that was now endlessly bright. Now, this is the moment you've been waiting for. You need to subscribe now to ensure you don't miss the next exclusive stories that dwell in the shadows of history. Smash that like button to feed the algorithm and show your support for more incredible journeys. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories. How did this story resonate with you? What did the darkness reveal? And wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Bring them into this circle of remembrance, and let us keep the stories alive together.